Welcome to Commercial Property Talk, the podcast where we explore the trends, challenges, and technologies shaping the world of commercial real estate. Today, I'm joined by Justin Knight, founder of Knight Commercial London. Justin has extensive experience in the London commercial property market, with a particular focus on West London and across the retail and office sectors. In this episode, we discuss his background in the industry, what he's seeing in the market today, how retail and office occupier demand is evolving, and where he sees the key opportunities and challenges in the months ahead. Let's get into it. Justin, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Gary. Good afternoon.
I've got some really interesting topics that we're going to cover today, but just before we get into that, could you start by telling us a bit about your background and what led you to launch Knight Commercial London?
Well, this goes back quite a way. It didn't actually start with commercial property. So back in there, I left university in 1997 and I had an idea I was going to become a fine art auctioneer, which I did first with Phillips auctioneers and came Bonhams and on to Sotheby's, and then at sort of the tender age of 29 decided that whilst it was a lovely place to work, I wasn't probably going to buy me a house or fund a mortgage. I thought, what out of my wife and I, one of us needed to grow up, and the finger was pointed at me. So she stayed in the wonderful world of art, and I decided to embark on what I thought was relatively allied field-built environments and with some residential agencies. At the time, back in 2004, this would have been, the property market for commercial was doing very well, very buoyant. There was literally no room at the inn. So I thought, well, a friend of mine suggested, and a couple of CEOs, that perhaps I should start with a good high-end resi firm in London and join Bective Leslie Marsh. I did 5 years on resi and sort of naturally gravitated towards development. Spent a lot of time working with developers, acquiring sites, building out, cutting teeth, learning how that side of things worked, took an interest in the finances and financing, how they ran their projects. And then, of course, that naturally led on to what I really wanted to always do, which was commercial property. And that break was given in 2014 by Brexit, who invited me to go and join the commercial department. And I qualified as a surveyor back in 2003, and then sort of transfer the skills from valuation. It was kind of an interesting crossover because there were a lot more variables in fine arts and antiques than there are in buildings. Yes, there are lots of variables in buildings, but with fine arts and antiques, you're dealing with everything has a value, every physical object, and that teaches you to look at items objectively and their each item's intrinsic value in relation to another. So I found coming into the property world, residential and commercial, find it much easier to identify the value of one building and its merits over another. And that stood me it's probably a good place moving forward to go straight into the sort of valuations for first, as I say, residential development and then into commercial. I found the agency side of it. It's quite glitzy. It's quite fun. You meet lots of interesting people who run businesses. And that was kind of a buzz for me, and sort of having caught that bug. And that would have been sort of, as I say, actually moved forward to 2014 onwards when I left the Resi, have naturally grown into the area that I'd worked in residentially, and then outwards, sort of anywhere within the M25, and then it contracted back along the Elizabeth line artery as sort of an area that I wanted to work in and deal with businesses in that zone, and found that a lot of them were sort of everything from small independent startups to big corporations, but they all seem to be it had an interesting start, most businesses, and it's probably due to that sort of cosmopolitan effect that London, particularly sort of West End, Central West End, Midtown, West London fringe offers, because it is so transient. And you get to meet lots of colourful characters and come across all kinds of interesting concepts. Mm-hmm. Some of them madder than others, some of them more mundane, but, very profitable. You like to deal with something I found a sort of a niche more in between, from the big corporate, the startup, to those who are sort of high net worth, if you like, high delivery, bespoke kind of niche market where you might have 1, 3, 5, 7, 12 outlets for a business, but the product delivery is high, and therefore they can afford to be in this particular part of the city, in this part of the country. just for us running a business, because that's where the profitability is. But also it's the fun, and you follow the fun and the interest before you follow the dollar. I always find that makes for a more successful and medium to long term business.
Yeah. And I really like what you said about fine art valuation and how that skill set has been helpful in your move into commercial property. Just so both myself and our listeners can understand more, what makes West London particularly different from other parts of London or other geographies across the UK?
I think it's a combination of a variety of things. I always start with one geography. As a surveyor, you sort of look at the geography of wherever a building is structure or plot of land or whatever it might be. The value of it is instantly intrinsically sort of knocked into you from when you start. You're thinking, well, if you're in a place that everybody can get to and has comes to easily, hence through Heathrow Airport, you're going to naturally find that you're going to get sort of lots of international interest. And I think that's what West London has particularly going for it. Seems to be all routes sort of lead here, sort of western, sort of West End. For that reason, if it's easy to get to internationally, that would normally, well, generally with a city, it creates a certain magnetism. I mean, the same as with, I'd suggest with, the sort of Leicestershire hub and the East Midlands Airport, you see that Nottingham, Leicester and Derby in the East Midlands are probably the more developed industrial and business zones of that region, principally because of the development of East Midlands Airport, very much the same with West London, a relationship with Heathrow being so close and easy to get here. Quite all of the company owners I speak to come here on holiday to London. Interesting, fun town to be in, lots going on, difficult to get bored here. And while they're here, it propagates lots of ideas about what they want to do. And then naturally they will land here. And of course, if you've got Americans, Malaysians, Middle Eastern sort of guys coming and girls wanting to start business here, they're very good at sort of projecting themselves into the marketplace and the marketing. And then that resonates, I think, throughout the country. This gets reported in the media, on press and so on, podcasts like this, whatever it might be. And that draws people in. It ultimately creates such a focus in a relatively small amount of a relatively small area. You again get sort of things like the film Notting Hill being made on that focus point, and that identification of a certain postcode then becomes international, not just within the city or regionally or nationally, if you like. And I think that's what makes West London so popular as well. You've got to look at the history of the area. The architecture that's here is very important. It has something that so many other countries in sort of cities and towns in the UK and the world that don't have. Every city and town has its culture and its history. The diversification from going from sort of what is this 14 buildings sort of built in 15th, 16th century onwards, the Georgian, the Victorian period, the Industrial Revolution. You can almost peel back the layers as you walk around London, and then you can see how it's evolved. Portobello Road, for instance, huge pull, Camden Town, Stables Market, Coal Drops Yard in King's Cross more recently. These are sort of old cultural centres and focal points for society that have always maintained a certain pull within the city, but also nationally, and then, of course, internationally. And I think that's what makes the area so special and such a focus point. And of course, if you get a focus point between people from all over the world and all over the country, then you get that sort of lovely mix of people exchanging ideas and driving their own businesses or social lives. And that is something that's very difficult to replicate. I think other cities and places have it, but not to the same depth that this particular part of the city has.
You mentioned the international aspect of London and how that has an impact on things. Is there any trend with that? Are you seeing any particular nationalities that are investing into West London more so than others?
Well, yeah, I tend to find myself with sort of the mentality of sort of the British sort of resonates with everyone else and how they see us, by which I mean we have a tendency to struggle to find a middle ground. So it's like all or nothing, which pretty much reflects how I find the commercial industry. It's either taps on or taps off. And this attitude can change very quickly, stimulated by political, cultural, the sort of seismic events, well, it could be weather event, whatever it might be. In this particular occasion, we're finding that, let's go back to last year, I had conversations with a couple of CEOs in America and based two F&B food and beverage companies in New York who were, one wanted to open, I think it was 12 or 15 restaurants around London, and then maybe Leeds, Sheffield, Liverpool, Manchester. And the other one was looking to open 8. And during the course of the beginning of last year, as we came through the year, by September, we sort of identified several good sites for them, got concepts already rolled out, ready to go. And I got calls from both within a week of each other saying, while this Labour government's in, we will not be opening any units until they're kicked out. Why? One, they seem to be completely anti-business of any sort. Two, they don't think about what they're doing. You do not increase national insurance at the same time as the minimum wage, and then decide to remove business rate relief so close to the end of the pandemic period. It should be staggered in, because I think they thought they could just get all the bad news out of the way in year 1 and 2, and by the end of sort of their tenure, 5th year, everyone was forgotten about it. Well, they won't, because the damage that they did impacted completely, in fact, more on the people it was supposed to help, because business owners, small, medium, and large, were thinking, well, if our wage bill has gone up that much, and whether you agree whether they should have, those elements have gone up or not, which incidentally I think they should, but not all at the same time, that's like a shock and awe effect. And other people around the world, business owners, see this in the UK and think, what on earth is this government doing? Are they deliberately trying to stop business? And all of this sort of thing it's drip fed into the psyche of businessmen and women all over the world, and those who want to come and invest here, and they don't. And the sum effect is money doesn't go into business doesn't expand, it contracts. And then that hurts the sort of the girls and boys who's starting off at the bottom, left uni or school or whatever it is, and want a job. They're not being given one. They think, why? Well, I want a job. Surely it should be the best time to get a job, because minimum wage has gone up, national insurance has gone up, I'm going to be better off. No, because there are only a finite number of places, and there's only so much that business and commerce can afford to pay. And if you're paying 10 people at a higher level than you were yesterday, maybe 2 of them have to get cut. And that's exactly what happened. And that's the negative effect that happened last year. And it was a culmination of lots of different things: the war, building costs, Ukraine. I mean, you could go on for hours about what's happening in the rest of the world and how that's had some form of ripple effect, and all negative here in the last couple of years, after we got a bit of bounce after COVID. Interestingly, Q4 last year, I was terrified, as so were so many people in business, commerce, and industry that I spoke to, about what Rachel Reeves was saying. And I'm delighted to see the most effective thing that Starmer's done is to curb what she was going to say, or what we suspected. I heard whispers coming out of the Treasury, probably things I shouldn't have heard, that he curbed her from delivering the budget she wanted to, and it became very vanilla and very unsensational. Now, that's great, because when you've got a government that delivers firebrand policies at the beginning of its term and it basically acts as a wrecking ball, they then need to shut up and let business and commerce take over. And that's what I feel happened towards the end of last year in Q4. And that created a settling effect. And that settling effect became a bland market in itself, but business and commerce started to take the reins from the politicians. And that stability has grown through the beginning of this year. And to that end, it's been noticed. And so we're getting those business elements, those 2 American gentlemen have come back to us subsequently, only a week or 2 ago, saying, we're now interested in the UK again. Your government's been shackled. Business and commerce has taken over and driving the economy, or so it would appear from the outside. And although it's not great, we can see an opportunity that we can grow together. These guys are putting down roots and taking key sites, not just throughout London, West London, but they're looking around to the other major towns and cities in the UK and look to embed themselves in here and benefit with a partnership. And that can only happen, that attitude, if we have a stable base. So we're finding a lot of those who left the country, or I'm talking the mega rich, the small few whose net sort of capital wealth combined is probably worth, what is a sizable proportion of the entire net wealth of the private wealth of the entire country, starting to return to us. And so, people say to me, oh no, people who left are staying away, those millionaires. Well, there will be a few millionaires who left, but the problem is, to them, if you've got 3, 4, 5 million and you even go and live in Dubai, it's cost you money to get there. It's going to cost you a load of money in tax to come back. So they're probably a bit stuck and will have to go somewhere else. But if you're a multi-billionaire investing in huge numbers of buying property, investing companies or whatever, you can afford to write that off and come back. And let's face it, a lot of them are saying that I speak to, they're bored. And nothing has the pizzazz of London. New York does to a certain extent, or Paris or wherever. But London's kind of, it is that sort of mid-Atlantic bridge between the two, the best of both worlds. And these guys and girls like it. And that's why they're coming back to put their money here, because one, it's stable. Two, it's fun. Three, they think they can see an opportunity because the markets have been so depressed since the last election.
Earlier, you mentioned the F&B business and some of the challenges that the political situation here and overseas is having on that sector. Is it the same for the office sector too? Have you seen anything particularly different with that?
So a lot of what I've been talking about is retail, restaurant, entertainment, investment in commercial buildings, mixed-use buildings. Office sector is a difficult one to give an overriding picture of. My experience talking to people in the trade, the sector obviously after the COVID-19 pandemic took such a seismic hit. A lot of the landlords, the big landlords speaking to, were really worried, and the asset managers, that it would really struggle to recover at all. Press were talking about it will never go back to the beginning of something new that we haven't witnessed. And to a certain degree, I think, yes. We've got a case study. We were asked to look at selling a building in St. James's, primary building on St. James's Square, very good. We valued that building, and it should have been, at the time, pre-pandemic, trading at something like £90 to £120 per square foot, subject to fit out with it. In the year following the pandemic, on St. James's Square, super prime, down by the Mall, off the Mall, in St. James's, some of the rents was falling as low as £35 a square foot, which is kind of what Hammersmith, some of the lower grade offices in Hammersmith and Shepherd's Bush were trading at, to give you an idea of the fall. But the landlords were just looking to have somebody in there to offset their rates liabilities. And because there's only a finite number of very sort of lovely sort of 18th, 19th century buildings in those squares around that, and they were good standard to fit out. There's a kudos for being there. Big corporations started to take advantage of those low rents and move in quickly. And I was amazed that within like 18 months, the rents were back at 60, 70, 80 a square foot. I mean, within 2 years, they're back up to 120 again. Most landlords who I heard of were enjoying full occupation. But that's only in the micro parts, the very best of the best in the best locations. As you move out, you'll find that what COVID effectively did was separate the different sectors of quality and the geography of the land and how each sector and part of the city performed. So the secondary stuff was a bit average, glass and steel, fitted out maybe 5 or 10 years ago. It's difficult to get people to come back in, particularly when they got used to working from home and the comforts of. And the boss wasn't watching so hard. So you've got people going back very quickly to the central zones. Those who would normally go to the secondary zones are spending more time working at home. Bosses enjoying not having to pay their rents where they could get out of their leases or brought those leases to an end. But as time goes on, year, 2 years later after the pandemic, 3 years on, both public and private sector, as they whispering, the boss is saying, whereas when people are at home and bored and working really hard to begin with, that starts to wear off after a while if someone isn't watching them. And so one particularly irritated person sort of in public said, I've got a big team. Every time I phoned them, when I first started trading post-pandemic, I could hear that they were working, there was silence in the background. Now when I phone them, I can hear daytime television. They've got to come back to the offices. So I think we've been through that full cycle of nobody in apart from the private sector, to people trickling back, to now businesses or bosses wanting their staff back in so they can see what they're doing. And as well, I think it becomes a bit of a lonely existence if you're just going out socializing. You don't have those two groups, your work friends or people you socialize at work and those you socialize with socially. And therefore you're losing a certain degree of connectivity, if you like, between people. You're not bouncing ideas from people. Even incidentally and subliminally, people are not picking up on new ideas, new things to do, new places to go, and the world starts to become a lot more sterile. And I think, again, for that reason, certainly with the creative industries, people are starting to move back much more fluidly, or their companies encourage their staff to come back to work in the offices. But those office spaces, I think, for those companies who did very well pre-pandemic, have big offices, more space than need, this is a very real trend. They say you've got one group in, where were they? Just off Oxford Street. This is a financial company, and about 16,000 square feet of office, and there are only about 12 of them. And the boss was on the top floor. That's a lot of overhead to be carried. And, one part of the office was a gym, another part of it was a bar. They didn't need this space. So they dumped the lease and they moved back over towards where they lived. And this is the other trend, is you've got business bosses not wanting to commute anymore, had enough of that. And so they want a smaller office near to where they live, but they want to buy it, because then they can put that office in as a SIP. But buy it in a SIP, and that becomes their pension or an extension of. So there are multiple reasons why they don't why they're sort of changing the dynamic of how they traditionally work. So get rid of the big office let, buy something, control your destiny, pay it into your pension, don't have to go so far to go to work. Tendency are that staff you employ will also not be in the central city zone. What's the central zone? They'll be more to the fringes of the residential zone, so not so far for them to travel. And therefore you have this huge shift, that shake-up, reconditions the mindset. So then you ask yourself, well, what happens to all these big office blocks that were once full of, if you like, battery hands? Well, you've got to start looking and thinking, well, we need housing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where my thinking's heading as well, because surely it makes sense to take those underutilized office buildings and repurpose them into housing. And we've seen a lot of that even outside of the city, even where I live, there's a fair amount of it happening. But that can't be a straightforward thing to do, right?
It depends. In reality, it's difficult because of planning. Hypothetically, it could be so much easier if we actually streamlined our planning policy. One of the things, if you want to streamline the modern world we live in, you allow local authorities, those people who are employed within a planning department, to make the right decisions. They've got all the information, all the data. They make a decision dispassionately based on fact. Where it goes wrong and things in planning get so tied up is where you get the NIMBY minority pressing councillors who are chasing votes to interfere with matters that they either know that they have no specialism, they don't understand, and ultimately, well, they're there to be supporting the community, but they're not. Councillors get involved in policies in order to grandstand and win votes, to make sure they stay in their positions. And that's a bit of a broad statement. But ultimately, ask yourself, what is a councillor? It's an elected person. Why do they do it? Why are they not chasing big money in some sort of city job? It's because they like the adoration of the public and they like to be put on a pedestal and told how great they are. That is the psyche of your average politician. And these people, therefore, do not make a decision which is in the best interests of the environment, society roundabout, because it's all about them. If you cut that out and just allow the planning departments, they're sort of unmolested by councillors to get on and do their job. Yes, if you weren't regulating or someone to oversee it, that's what a local MP is for. But this is an entire section of the process that needs to be removed. If you remove it, I can guarantee that you will see so many more projects come to fruition of regeneration of areas. And that doesn't mean for those people shouting it, no, we hate gentrification. Regeneration and gentrification are very different. Regenerating is for the good of all and observing sort of SIL notices. So we take money from developers to put cash back into parks and highways and paddle courts and whatever it might be for everyone who lives there. And these sorts of projects can't happen if we have the constant interfering by councillors. This is a central government, Tory, Labour, Liberal, Green, whoever gets in reform, they need to sit down and look at this and say, this element of the planning process needs to be reformed, they need to be cut out, they need to be silenced. And in doing so, you will find that these projects will come to bear and that we'll start to enjoy, not immediately, because it takes time to build. Ultimately, within a medium term, you'll start to see environments, whether they're urban conurbations or rural, significantly benefit from that change. But it takes a brave politician to do that and push that change.
And I'm guessing you're going to tell me there aren't enough brave politicians around at the moment, especially the climate we're in right now.
Vote chasers. I mean, we need to look at, what was it, 16 years with the Tory party who weren't there, more social democrats. And they just sat there apologising for being millionaires and doing absolutely nothing that's of any consequence. When we voted out, whether you're in or out of Brexit, they had a prime opportunity to make it work. And it's not just voting out that's made the country bad. What's made the country bad? It doesn't matter whether you're in or out. You look at all the sort of the mechanics of it and you think, how can we make this work best for us? What can we control? And all the parts that we control, we didn't take advantage of. We didn't sort of say, for instance, the one that kills me. We have the ability to allow anybody in Europe, people that sort of tend to think and behave and be trained to the same sort of specification and standards, similar sort of educational backgrounds, to come and work here as they've had before, to filling jobs, everything from waitering up to sort of working in city to architects, designers, artists, whatever it might be, musicians. And we don't allow them to come and work here anymore, whereas we had a lovely synergy with them before, and we have that in our hand. Now, if the French, for instance, don't want to allow us to go and work there, it's fine. They're going to lose out. But I can guarantee you, if we took the same work, if we took that first step, one, we'd be able to put much needed employment back into sort of hotel, leisure, food, construction industry, you name it, the list goes on, where we're bereft of the numbers of people we need to keep those industries going, and therefore the built environment and agriculture as well. And we're not taking advantage of that. We'd fix so many problems, because if we get that sort of number of people coming back into the country, we know that they sort of have an attitude of sort of work ethic similar to the British. We know that they'll contribute, and we know that because we'll have more of them, they will bring down wage prices. Whereas at the moment, for instance, the construction industry, the price of a labourer has gone sky high. You would arguably say, well above where it should be. To which somebody will turn around and say to me, yeah, well, the wages do need to go up because they need to be able to eat, and the price of food needs to go up. Well, the reason we've had this escalation in prices is principally because we have cut off a supply of a workforce, and then it's managed to drive up the price of everything, because a person, whether they're sweeping the floor in a factory with their middle management or at the top or whatever they do in service industries, all their salaries have gone up chasing being able to, I should say, because they're selling less product, because there are less people to create whatever it is that they're doing, they need to put up their salaries, which I'll get the right way around. And if we had more people on the floor working at a lower wage price point, therefore we'd be more effective in producing whatever it is that we're producing.
So has Brexit made your job a lot harder then? What have you specifically seen in the world of bringing a space to market and filling that space and getting the best deal possible?
Yeah, very much so. It's the main complaint I get from any industry, actual sector, whether it's public or private, is we just can't get enough good people. And they don't have the right skill sets or the attitude, or because of the lead the government takes, saying everybody's rights they deserve, they should be given on working a 3-day week or something. It doesn't exactly incentivize people to go out and work hard. You're creating a culture of give me, and I'm not going to do anything to justify it. And until you, I feel, mix up people from lots of different places in the world, Europe, wherever it might be, and the various attitudes, and every country has a certain stereotypical attitude. If you don't tap into the best parts of every nationality and you allow them to mix and pick up on the best traits that each of them have, then you won't condition a sort of a workforce, sort of a cosmopolitan workforce that's going to perform at a higher level. And this covers lots of well, this covers all sectors, and it's simply, for instance, coach, we get lots of kids from all different types, shapes, sizes, and abilities, and we don't extreme them. We put them all in together, and guess what? The ones who are really good start helping to coach the ones who need a bit of help, and the ones that need a bit of help ask for help and get better. And it's the same with any workforce.
Okay, you've made a lot of really interesting points, and I'm interested to know from you what you think the solution is. What's next for London, and what does that look like over the next 12, 24 months and beyond?
I think the word that we need is stability. And we need to be seen as, once again, the UK being a bit of a safe haven. And if we can propagate that attitude both nationally and appreciate, as I said again, appreciate people who live here, appreciate what they have, and then sort of welcome with open arms anybody else that comes here and allow them to work with them, then we will see a naturally progressive market. I think this entire country's sort of status, whether you put empire and before and after, has come through trade. We haven't pushed our identity as being British or a particular religion on anyone. We've always been about trade. And as long as we can keep the focus on trade, not sort of go down rabbit holes of sort of religious bigotry or one part of society wanting to fight back against another or another in control, and we actually focus on the one thing that we're good at, a nation of shopkeepers, and get back to our core roots of sort of how the country was built and how it became successful, and that includes having sort of a manufacturing base, then I think that you'll see a steady progression, and other countries will start to gravitate back towards us and their industries and want to open places of business here. But as I say, if we get caught up in the sideshows, like the horror show that is the Ukraine war, or even sort of Palestine, or sort of
Yeah.
the Iranian war, all these sort of corrosive um, situations of various parties taking a pop at each other, been taking a pop at each other in some cases for thousands of years, that drives people away from those regions and to here. So we don't need to replicate that. What we need to provide is a stable, safe platform for people to live, to coexist. And then if we do that, then the attitude will turn away from sort of looking at each other from a perspective of difference, but instead engage each other ideologically and from a personality perspective, and understanding that we all just want to get on. And what's the best way to get on is to be positive and creative. And that manifests itself through business, and therefore conditions a happier working society. I don't think we need to go any further. That's a very basic ideology, but if we can stick to that, then we will have a natural sort of transformation from what has been a bit of a rocky period going forward. But we need to stop with the social tinkering, the political dictatorship within our ranks, and our both all the major parties are guilty of this. And to stop making society what it isn't, and look at people as a person rather than a unit in a rank
Yeah.
of an army that supports one sector or the other. That's corrosive. That's not going to help us. And I think we've reached a point where we can't afford that anymore. We need to start thinking about purely bit of roll your sleeves up, go back to old fashioned mentality of, take out what you put in.
Yeah. And with that in mind, is there a particular area of West London or a sub-market that you're watching at the moment, or that you think has a lot of potential for growth?
Yeah, it's always been quite a creative zone. I think that with the diminishing focus of office workers in Central, we've naturally picked up that section of society, and they've started to work closer to home, which means there are lots of different social types. And it means that certain areas, for instance, like Notting Hill, which seems very creative, very media, very arty, you've suddenly got financial industries moving in, so on and so forth. And that may be horrifying for some of the traditional Portobello Road type sort of dwellers, but it also adds to the characteristic of the area. But what it does, it brings in behind the scenes a lot of much needed revenue to regenerate areas that perhaps haven't benefited within what is as widely observed as an affluent area. But if you look a little bit more carefully, and you know the geography of the land, like I've come to do, there are certain areas, particularly if you go to North Kensington, where regeneration work has been very slow until development of Portobello Square. Very particularly bad council estate was demolished to make way for that. And that just doesn't mean pushing people out. It means getting rid of a particularly depressing sort of 1970s style estate, or 70s, 80s estate, that was literally falling apart. And if you live in an apartment that's falling apart, you don't look after it, do you? If you live in one that's nice and smart, you feel better about yourself. And that's sort of what I say. So the money that's sort of being repurposed from city that come into these sort of western zones is helping to regenerate those areas that for donkey's years have desperately needed it to fill in the patches. You didn't have this sort of desperate sort of attitude, sort of rich person living on one side of the street, poor person on the other. It sort of evens out. Let's face it, nobody's ever going to be a millionaire, billionaire. We're never going to see them in Sweden. So I think it's an evening out of society, and the money that's spent on the infrastructure then starts to manifest itself in business, because you're giving everybody an opportunity to start that small business, and every business starts from somewhere. I'll give you an example. Business from home, which seems to spread all over the city, was initially started by a young guy making sort of cinnamon buns in his his home kitchen, and
Okay.
then sort of at times you were allowed to go out during the pandemic. They were so popular that the hours he was open, they were queuing around the block, locals, to get these buns. That business was then grown to a point where it's now being sold to venture capitalists. But it makes the point is that was one person rolling his sleeves out, doing something he enjoyed, and it kept turned into a very profitable business. He's now gone to run or to start another chain with new ideas. But it's that kind of injection of money into the area, people giving people like that particular chap some funding to help him realize his dream, repurposing the money and not funneling it down the usual avenues of corporation to allow the small business to develop, which actually that is the lifeblood. People go to an area like West London, see the small independent businesses. They don't go there to see to visit the big corporates. You do that on Bond Street, Oxford Street, Westfield. But the repurposing is, as I say, again, coming of money from other parts of the city and internationally into this West London fringe to help bring up and regenerate those areas that haven't benefited over time to the same extent as other parts of West London. That is what's really going to underpin business here, helping it grow, and ultimately the community, and make it a place people want to come to.
Justin, I've really enjoyed the conversation, but sadly we are out of time. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Commercial Property Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe for more conversations with leaders across commercial real estate. I'm Gary Clark. See you next time.